Hello everyone and welcome to GameGuru live broadcast. I'm your host Lee Bamber, CEO of The Game Creators, and we have arrived at the end of 2023. Anyone who's joining us live, welcome. Those who are watching this later on in YouTube land, I hope you enjoy it. The basic format is we mostly do Q&A, but if I've got anything to demonstrate, I'll demonstrate it first, and then we'll go into lots and lots of Q&A, and if appropriate, do some demonstrations live. And a little addition to the usual format, I actually got some questions sent a couple of days, if not a week and a bit ago, saying, can you ask my questions even before the broadcast starts? Not such a bad idea, actually. Submitting the questions before the broadcast gives me a little bit more time to understand the question and maybe formulate an answer that's a little bit more thought out rather than just completely off the cuff. And I wouldn't just do this for anyone, but there are certain contributors who deserve a little bit of extra of my attention, and I'm happy to answer them. And the questions are generic enough that the answers apply to basically everyone. So this is GameGuru Max in 2023. Oh, P.S. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everybody. Doesn't feel like it, like one day Christmas and then straight back to work. So what do I do when I'm not at work? Fix GameGuru Max bugs, do performance tests, things like that. So it feels like I've already passed the celebration phase and getting back into what I enjoy the most, which is tinkering with my computer and making software. So yeah, I wanted to creep that in. It is after all the festive weeks between the last day of work and then the first day of new work in 2024. So let me get to these two questions first, and then I'll show you some stuff that I've been working on. And I'll read it out verbatim. The first question is, what specific actions can individual members of the GameGuru Max community take to best support the development efforts? Well, basically what you've already been doing. It's much appreciated that when you do find something that's an issue with GameGuru Max, that you go onto our issues board and type it out in as much detail as possible so we can reproduce it quickly. 80% of fixing a bug is trying to reproduce it. The fix these days is relatively quick because we're familiar with the engine so much. Just point us in the right direction, we'll find out the naughty bit of code. So in 2024, more of the same, please. And in 2023, what I found was people who make videos or do a screenshot and then really break down the step-by-step on how to reproduce it, those are so easy to fix, those bugs. Whereas an issue with just a one-liner, it don't work no more, in capitals, that really isn't useful. So if you're asking me what's going to be useful to support the development efforts, as I said, an issue, lots of detail, video if possible, make it super easy for the TGC team to reproduce the bug, and you will get your fix lickety-split. Now I see as the years roll on, 2023 was really the year where we came out of early access and we fixed all of the issues that were reported from the very first alpha release of GameGuru Max. And I'm pleased to report that before the end of 2023, we briefly managed to get to 0 bug count. That's not to say every single bug was fixed, but every single issue was attended to. It was either fixed, or it was put down as not reproducible, or please add more information because this might be a feature request in disguise. But we did get to that magical 0 bug count, so I'm really pleased about that. And of course in 2024 we'll continue to fix bugs, that's inevitable, but I see 2024 being more about transitioning into some new aspects. And that leads me to the next question, and there's question number 2. There's only 2 questions. What development efforts will you be focused on in the first quarter of 2024? And let me preface the answer by saying it won't be multiplayer, it won't be third person, and it won't be vehicles. Nice things, and I dare say we will pay lip service to them at some point in 2024, but we want to get serious, make sure this game maker is set up and is ready for its intended use. So in 2024, in this order, it's performance, stability, compatibility, and publishing. So I'm going to demonstrate today the first of those four things, performance, and what we're going to do about it. But that's basically how we're going to kick off 2024. A year is a long time, and we're going to get a lot done in 2024. And it's good to know that all of those legacy issues that may have been reported up to 2 years ago have been dealt with. So now we're going to deal with a whole new set of bugs. But I'm thinking at least more, probably 50% of all the time is going to be spent on looking at performance, looking at memory use, looking at how many computers can we get GameGuru Max games to run on. And I actually have stats to back it up. Steam rather kindly scrape lots of computer PC system data on every single user that uses Steam. It gives you a very clear picture of what systems people are using. And I've removed all of the seriously rubbish CPUs and GPUs. And this is a conservative estimate, but I think we can get to 94% compatibility for Steam users. So 94% of Steam users will be able to run all of the GameGuru Max Hub demos at 60 FPS. I think that's a reasonable goal. The other 6% of Steam users are literally running games on toasters. They play 2D games in black and white. And it's sensible not to try and go for 100%, because otherwise you end up sort of spending a lot of time on an optimization that only 3 people, if that, will actually get to enjoy. But 94%, that's a big chunk of the market on Steam. And we're also going to be looking at other distribution mediums as well. We are on Steam and we release the software on Steam, but we are going to look at all the other ones. There's other stores that are now coming online that you might want to support when you release your games. So we're going to be looking at those as well. So that's it for the answers to the 2 questions that were pre-submitted. If you like this idea, please also, I was going to say submit them to me, but I'm probably going to get inundated with pre-questions for the next broadcast. But let's start like that. It's lee@thegamecreators.com. If I get flooded with questions, we'll probably set it up that I have a moderator delete all of the "Are you supporting multiplayer?" So we have a shortened list to start off. And kick off the next broadcast, which will be last Wednesday in January 2024. So, enough waffle. Let's actually start looking at the screen, see what I'm talking about. Okay, so the thing I want to show is a tool called Optic. Now, before I carry on, I just want to check my chat. In case the people are screaming at me. Hello. Bread and butter, industrial toasters. Hi everyone. Yes. Okay. So the reference to toaster clearly indicates that I am heard, which is great. I want to introduce you to something called Optic. I didn't know about this forever. I only learned about it about, I don't know, a month ago, 2 months ago. What is it? Well, in the vernacular, it's called a performance profiler. There are traditional profilers like GPA and VTune from Intel, and those are very cool and powerful, but they're also very sophisticated, and you need to do a lot of effort to actually get the correct data that you want to correctly identify the slow parts of your game or game's engine or graphics engine, etc. Then I was browsing around and I discovered something called Optic ICK. And it was incredibly simple. It was a header file, 2 lines of code injected anywhere you want, and it lets you instantaneously tag what your engine is doing. And then there's a separate thing that you run, and it just watches your game, watches the tags, and then it builds this, what you can see in front of you right now. Basically, each individual frame of your game at the top. So I just ran it for like 20 seconds or something. Then underneath that is divided by threads, all of the different things that your frame is doing, apportioned by time, so you can see who's hogging your cycles. And then at the bottom you get some lovely charts to nest down into the nested functions, the actual breakdown of all the stats for performance milliseconds, and of course just at the top here a nice little chart of up means it's hogging, and then down here in the 7 millisecond area, that's kind of where you want your game engine to be. Now, we have been doing profiling for years and years and years, but Optic color codes it and puts it all on one screen, makes it super easy to navigate. And anytime you kind of say get to an area where you think, that's not enough granularity, you just go back into the code, add some additional labels, and then it drops it underneath there, and you can break it down to find out what's going on. So I'm not going to teach you how to use Optic. You won't need to use Optic, that's kind of my job. But I just want to show you how cool it is, and you might be interested to know a few things that I've discovered already. Discover being the operative word. Not gone and fixed everything, but the correct way of doing performance work isn't just to blindly optimize what you think might make the thing faster. It's to actually study the data and see exactly which bits are slow, whether they should be that slow, and if they shouldn't be that slow, get rid of it. Obviously, the fastest routine is a routine with nothing in it, or optimize it until it's sufficiently proportional to everything else that needs to happen. So let me just show you what I'm looking at, and then I'll show you what my conclusions were. And in the Q&A, if you also have some observations that are like face palm obvious, please let me know, because I'm still sort of been so much time fixing the bugs, not really spend a lot of time on the performance work. So in 2024, you can see a lot of performance work, and I can imagine in the early days, a lot of quick and easy wins, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So let me just show you quickly what you're looking at. Right at the top, CPU frame. That's how many milliseconds this frame, and I just plucked it out the air. What am I looking at? Well, there's two. I ran a little bit of the game. This is the part where I faced 3 million polygons in the level, and then I turned around and looked at the sky, and this is what when I looked at the sky looks like. So we won't look at that. That's a cheat. Let's look at the typical chunk of the game. So let's say that one. That's pretty typical. And as I said, the CPU frame time, you would probably be looking for frames per second. Well, this is actually in a different metric. This is milliseconds. So it took 13 milliseconds for process this one frame. And if you're lucky, you can get 60 such frames processed and out the door in a second. So that's where you get your 60 FPS. And there's 1,000 milliseconds in a second. So 13 milliseconds is 13 out of 1,000. So you can imagine this is pretty good. If it was about 16 milliseconds, then you're looking at about 60 FPS. Because 13 is smaller than 16, we're looking at more like 70 or 75 FPS, which is just nice. But I'll show you why that probably isn't the case when I show you what I'm running in terms of CPU. So out of the 13.179 milliseconds, it then breaks down into, well, what's happening inside that 30 milliseconds, and we drop down to this. Now, the master update is effectively representing all of the game logic and all of the prep of sorting out what's going to be drawn onto the screen. Not actually submitting to the GPU, just sorting out what's going to be drawn. And as you can see, that's taken up 6 of the 13, so about half. And that's then further subdivided into this, which is your actual logic. It's the game logic, just variables and data swimming around, nothing really to do with graphics, which is then further broken down into physics, the lower scripts, and inside the lower scripts, some of them are calling the intersect command, which is what you would call a raycast. As you can see, they're quite substantial. So I've got some ideas on how I can add a subsystem, a pre-baked system that would almost entirely eliminate the need for nearly all of the raycasts in a level. And I haven't seen any white papers on how that can be done. It's amazing no one's actually thought about this for more than 5 seconds. They just suggest ways in which you can make the raycasts cheaper and do them less often and group them together and all the rest of it. But I've actually thought of a way to completely eliminate the need to do a raycast and still get the data that you want. So you can see you add them up. I mean, it's 0.2, 0.1 and 0.3, but that's literally a millisecond I could eat. And then, of course, this is a lot quicker. And as you can see, there's some other bits. You've got an entity loop, which runs all of the objects and its animation cues. Some additional logic that's still built in, some particle stuff, but small fry. Now, I'll give you an example. If I spent all my time optimizing the particle system, for example, what's the point? Look how quick it is actually in the frame. That would have been a waste of my time. And that's the purpose of performance profiling. It's clear to me that, right, that's a big chunk, but yeah, that's my entire game logic. But look at this. Run animation update system. Look how big that is. That's almost as big as the entire game logic being run. And in this scene, I'm so far away from any characters. Why am I animating all these characters? If I'm standing so far away, I can't even see any of the animations. So that lit up like a Christmas tree to me. Pardon, pun intended. Which is actually part of an overall update system for updating all the different parts of the graphics engine. As you can see, you've got your regular transforms, it runs material updates, armature, which is the actual animations themselves. So you can add that to the animations. Look at that, add that to that. It's quite a lot of a chunk. And then you've got little bits. Visibility checking and updating is very quick. I'm pretty pleased about that. And submitting all the meshes to the graphics card is also super quick. So you can clearly see this is an area to look at. But another big area is this second half. As you can see, you've got 5.8 milliseconds taken up in submitting all of the different... what's really cool about the Wicked engine is it's multi-threaded. So it gets a lot of threads together and it runs them in parallel and does a lot of good work. And as you can see, if I zoom in, all of these are the different threads and it's submitting a lot of work to a lot of different threads and it's all getting done, blah, 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 blah. And then only one of the threads is actually responsible for the present. And it's the present that's 5.7 milliseconds. Not all of this. This is practically free. It's just that final present. And that's because there's 3 million polygons for the visible scene and 1 million polygons for all of the shadows that are being rendered in the background. That's why you get nearly 6 milliseconds there. But that's fine, like I said, to get 60 FPS, we only need to be less than 60 milliseconds overall. And 3-4 million polygons, 6 milliseconds, that's fine. But that's fine only up to a point, and I'll show you why in my next screen, which is here. This is the the CPU that I'm running right now. It's AMD Ryzen 9 5950X. It has, count them, 16 hardware cores providing 32 virtual threads. I have too many threads. I have as many threads as I want. As you can see, 45,000, I'm spoiled. Remember that 94% Steam users I'm aiming for? Let me show you the low-end CPU I'd need to support. It's the Intel Core i5-3210M mobile CPU at 2.5 gigahertz. 45,000 versus 2,471. Now don't worry, that's just an amalgamation. That 45,000 takes into account lots of parallel operations. What you want to be focusing on is the single thread clock speed, which is 2.5. The AMD Ryzen, only 3.4, so it's not actually that far off. But as you can see, the important part is we need to make sure that we use our threads well. We've got 4 of them. And make sure that, providing you've got 4, we can get 60 FPS on all of the demos. At 2.5 gigahertz, we're okay on the CPU side. Now let me look at the GPU. This is what I've currently got wedged into my computer. It's a Radeon RX 580, which I swapped with a community member because I needed to fix a bug that only happened on this card. And that runs at 8,894. Of the 94% of Steam users, the lowliest, humblest card, amongst many, is the GeForce GTX 1050, which is 5,053. So 8894 to 5053. And remember, the 8894 score was capable of running 4 million polygons at 6 milliseconds, perfectly fine. When I run it at 5, you could almost say that I've got to find a way of only rendering 2 million polygons instead of 4 to get the same kind of results. So that's one of the goals when we start optimizing what's being rendered to the screen. And also this GTX 1050, I have a dedicated card that's going to be crowbarred into my PC at some point. But by happenstance, I was, when it was the Christmas holiday festive seasons have a bit of time off, I was digging out through my old laptops and I managed to find something I completely dismissed as completely unusable, which was a Median Eraser. And the reason it was unusable, it still had an HDD, a physical disk hard drive running at 5,400 RPMs. Yuck. And so I went online and you could basically buy an SSD replacement for 20 quid. And that completely transforms the laptop into something that's usable. And whilst I was pouring through the specs, I realised it has the GTX 1050M, the mobile version of this graphics card, built in. So not only will I be able to optimise for this dedicated card that runs on a PC, I'll have its equivalent mobile version, and I haven't got the specs, I think I have to tap an M in the 1050M, and then make sure that it runs on that laptop as well. And that should get us to the 94% of all Steam users. And I'm going to say that's the goal for 2024. I'm not saying it's going to take all year, but I think it's reasonable to say if we can get to that, then GameGuru Max could be the game maker you'd choose if you didn't want to go all out, hell for leather, highest end graphics cards. You just wanted a game that ran on pretty much everyone's PC that's out there right now. And I think that's a worthy goal, and it allows GameGuru Max to fit in a particular niche where we're not needing you to have the latest, greatest hardware. You just need to have creative ideas and you want to make a game. And then when you press the save standalone, it actually works on everyone's machine. No hassle, no fuss. So, as a summary, and as a 24-minute summary, that is basically the goal for 2024. We have the tools right now for the job. We have the hardware to be able to make sure that when we've done all of the right things, it runs great. And hopefully, as we continue through 2024, there will be game projects that will demand these levels of performance improvements, memory management, etc. Because those games are destined for sale. Those games want to be out there on Steam and other places selling and keeping their users happy. Users that suddenly find that the game crashes every 5 minutes or it's slow as sin, well, you're not going to have a happy user base, are you? So basically that's a sort of a byproduct of what we're going to be working on in 2024. So I see the chat filling up rather nicely. I do apologise that we rather snuck this one in. I imagine some people thought I'd be just sneaking off for Christmas, so we haven't got a full house. But thank you again for those who did sort of think, wait a minute, maybe you will show up on the last Wednesday of the last month of 2023. So that's what I wanted to show and give you a little hint of progress so far. I'm going to have a lot more progress to show you at the end of January and February. But let me just go back to the chart, because there's one thing I wanted to pluck out of here, which surprised me, and it's probably the lowest of the hanging fruit ever. Right, 13 milliseconds. But look, the whole thing is sequential. It's doing all of the logic, finishing that, and then doing all of the rendering. Look, it's one thread. It's all happening on one CPU thread. These aren't separate threads at this point. Now, there is a bit of overlap. It's not just a single-threaded model, completely sequential from beginning to end. It is multi-threaded and there is some overlap. But I was very disappointed that I had to finish all of this before I could start the submission to the GPU. Because if I just show you the game, that should still be running. Get rid of the gun. Oh, okay. Look on the left-hand side, 75 FPS. CPU frames, 8 milliseconds. GPU frames, 12 milliseconds.
Nothing here.
That's one of the enemies. So 8 and 12 added together is 20. But as you can see, it's not 20, it's 13. So there is some overlap. But I always imagined that the CPU time and the GPU time were completely parallel. They'd literally run side by side. And so whichever is the biggest number, that was the number that decided your frame rate. Now, you do have some sort of critical path work. You can't just do things completely in parallel. There has to be certain sort of waits while some data is getting ready before you can figure out what to draw to the screen. But the first thing I'm plucking out is, why can't I just sort of start this stuff earlier from the last lot of logic that was already calculated? So basically I have another thread here, bring this over here, and basically parallel them up a lot more. Now remember before when we said we're targeting a 4-core, rather 4-thread system, so there'll have to be some management of having some dedicated thread to make sure that isn't being cache thrashed or thread cached, thrashed, whatever you want to call it. So I'm going to be careful that I don't just mess it up for the lower end cards. But that's the first thing I spotted. Why am I waiting all the way to the end before I start that? Why can't I start it almost at the same time with data from the last? At 60 frames per second, you won't really notice that the logic data that you created is actually from the last frame, not from the current frame. And the other thing, and I think we talked about it, but it's something I definitely want to investigate, is that run animation and the armature. All those things, I'm pretty sure it's just running the animation, no matter, as long as the character's within 3,000 units, run its animation stuff. And the Wicked engine is saying, okay, I'll update the animation. The frame might not even change or change slightly. Or it might be an idle animation on a loop. But if the character's 1,000 units away, you won't even notice that idle animation. And yet the engine's being asked to process all them vertices every single frame. And if I can steal 2 milliseconds back just by one small optimization, then this 13 becomes 11, and then you're looking at 90 frames per second instead of 75. So those are two things that I plucked out right away. And this big present, that's the 4 million polygons. As some of you already know, there's not much effective occlusion. There's no level of detail. There's no clever tricks to hide large groups of small objects if it happens to be inside a building that you can't even see. So there's lots of ways in which we can take that 4 million polygons, squash it right down to just a handful of geometry that you can see, and that 5 milliseconds drops to 1 or 2. If I scroll later on just to show you what that might look like, look how small the actual processing of all the geometry before you get onto the next frame is compared to all the rest of it. And you can see that one is only 8.9 milliseconds, which gives you probably 100 FPS or more. So you see there's some low-hanging fruit, and then there's some work and some studies to figure out what we can get away with. And eventually we'll get to a point where it's extremely packed, looks really pretty on a 4-thread system, and there's no clocks wasted, and you get the maximum amount of FPS on the system that you're running. So that's our goal. And of course along the way making sure that it doesn't crash, that it doesn't try and eat 16 gigabytes of system memory, which it's trying to do right now. If I just go back to the game and press this one, how do I get it? I think it's probably, yeah, I'll just show you the top left. Draw calls 1,300, and the 344, that's how many shadow draw calls are being rendered. As you can see, 4 million on the visible geometry and 1.2 million polygons just for shadows. But look what the screen's looking at. It's a floor and a bit of wall. Why am I rendering 4 million polygons just for, I don't know, what is that, about 5,000 polygons that you can actually see? So I think there's a lot of work to go on the reducing that side of it. And of course this is going to be interesting because it's all logic and you can do things in clever ways, but you can't avoid the fact that at some point you do have to start pushing polygons out to the screen. But I think there's a lot of ways we can improve that with the techniques I've already mentioned. So for those of you joining in for a casual watch, I apologise for the massive onslaught as we deep dive into performance, but as you could probably hear, I'm pretty excited about being able to profile properly, identify some easy wins that I can then turn around, send it out to people who genuinely want to see much nicer performance on the games that they're working on, and then see that instantly available without actually having to do anything except allow Steam to do the auto update. So I think now is the time, 32 minutes in, so that's 30 minutes of, in quotes, demo, so that leaves us with 27 minutes of what we all came here to enjoy, which is the Q&A. So let's get into that. Okay, so I'm going to dig out the live chat window. As I said in previous ones, I haven't figured out how to do this automatedly. So I apologise if it's a bit of a break in the smooth running of this broadcast. And as you can see, because I have been thinking so much about performance, I'm not thinking too much about presentation. Anyway, there you go. Hopefully you can see the chat, and I'm going to use a different window, and I'm going to scroll to the top. I'm going to look for questions. So let's just get to a question mark. In previous broadcasts, I always ask people to stick a question mark at the end so I can scroll through quickly. But it looks like the live chat's pretty light today, so I think I can just read each line and then sort of interpolate the possibility of a question. Happy Christmas. Thank you, everyone. Great stuff. Looks like we don't have a lot of questions today. This is great. 4-Slice Toaster is multiplayer. First question is from Daniel Williams. Do you work on GameGuru Max with a laptop or desktop? Both. I have one desktop, a monster. The desktop's so big it actually can fit 2 motherboards. I'm not being brave enough to put a second motherboard in, but it's a pretty clever system. It can actually run 2 separate computers in one massive box. Didn't realise it at the time when I ordered it, but when it arrived on a pallet. It looks stupid. Very stupid, but that's what I'm running on my main development, a desktop of unbelievable size and volume. And then the next fastest is a NUC, an Intel NUC Super Extremo, which has all SSDs, fastest M.2s, and a really massive Intel Arc dedicated GPU in there. So I'm running that as a test box, so it's a nice clean box that I can run clean tests on. Then I have 2 laptops. I have a laptop that if I had to go abroad and demonstrate VR, this laptop can do that. It is that good. I mean, it's loud as a train and it gets very hot, but it can actually run everything that GameGuru Max can push in VR at 60 FPS. But not everyone has that kind of laptop. Most people have the aforementioned Medion X Eraser, which is advertised as a gaming laptop. And so if it's advertised as a gaming laptop, then I need to make sure that GameGuru Max games can run on it. And that laptop is the lowliest of the ones that I test GameGuru Max on. There are other ones further down the food chain, such as a Chromebook, which runs on Android. And that's used for other parts of TGC's business that deals with the non-PC side, the apps and the like. But for now, all of my attention will be on Windows 10 or above, making sure that it runs as required for a game maker. So those are the hardwares that I'm currently running to do various developments and testing. Don't see the need to add any more to that. It's actually quite difficult to juggle so much hardware. And I've got a really neat KVM system, so I can switch between a lot of those systems without having to do a lot of plugging and unplugging. So, and of course, this is the product of 30 years of getting it wrong, and an extremely sufficient backup system. So anytime I need to go back a week or a month or a year or 10 years, I can go back that far to get the appropriate backed up files. So it's a pretty neat system. And on top of that, because it's related, the end of the year, I always switch out the old diary for the new diary and then gut the office, which means all the stuff that's been lying around and not used for 12 months, get them in a box, label them, shove them away, big hoover, big polish, and now I'm sitting in a nice, clean, tidy office. And when you sit in a nice, clean, tidy office, you find that you have a nice, clean, tidy mind, leaving yourself lots of extra RAM in order to fill up with the responsibilities of the new year. And that's where you find me now, in a very happy place before it gets completely mad and insane in 2024. So next question is further down, a lot further down. There may not be a single question in this live chat. Okay, is there a question? Okay, it doesn't mean grab your large book, slash your thumb, I'm glad GameGuru Max will focus on performance 24. It is a good choice after the functions already added. Yeah, for those who, for question 2, the pre-question 2, are disappointed that we're not going on to adding new features. And if you look through the issues board, there is a ton of max enhancement requests. And I do sympathise, but just as we put priority on bug fixing of priority 1, 2 and 3, I believe it's the right move to focus on performance, stability and compatibility next. I mean, new features is nice and all, but if you can't make a game with what we've got right now, what's the point? So I think once we get those 3 boxes ticked, then I think it makes perfect sense to think about new features. Remember, we're not alone in this. The community has full access to the source code of GameGuru Max. And if anyone wants to leapfrog and add third person and add vehicles and a really cool set of physics commands or whatever it is, you know, we're not stopping anyone doing that. And if it's good enough and it's complete enough and it's solid, we're going to put it in the official version if the author agrees. Absolutely not averse to that. But I think our responsibility is to make sure that the game maker is rock solid and it actually lets you produce and sell and maintain a game, the game idea that is in your head, and not some crummy half-baked version of it in terms of how it executes on people's PCs. Okay, next question. Oh, is that in another language? GameGuru Max osa priesca o vericini mea noi de Wicked Engine. In translation, GameGuru Max, is it using the Wicked Engine? I'm sure that's not what it says. The answer is yes. GameGuru Max uses the old DirectX 11 Wicked Engine. I don't think the latest Wicked Engine actually supports 11 anymore. I think it's moved to DX12 and Vulkan, but we use the old one. We did spend around 6 months trying to upgrade to DX12, and it was mostly successful, except our terrain didn't work, the trees didn't work, and there was some strange things. There was a lot of code remapping that messed a lot of other things up, so we had to backtrack to 11. We're staying there until we've solved the immediate issues. At some point in the future, I dare say we'll be looking at either DX12 or Vulkan down the road. Well, GameGuru Max get a newer version of Wicked Engine. I guess that was the correct translation. And I guess my answer ticks that box. I must have subconsciously knew what the real question was and answered it anyway. Okay, next question down will be from J Birdmax. How will we determine the min RAM requirements for our games? Your min RAM requirements will be the same as the min RAM requirements of GameGuru Max as is, because that's what we're going to code to. Not only the game maker, the tool, but any games that are produced with the tool will have the same minimum specifications. And as I've already mentioned, we're going to try and get those min specs as low as possible, so 94% of Steam users will be able to run the game that you've produced. I think at the moment it's 4 gig or 8 gig of system and about 4 gig of video. I think that's kind of where we are now for minimum specs. But the 94% of Steam users, I think, don't quote me on this, but I was a bit shocked at how it was even possible, but it should be. It's 2 gigabytes of video memory and 4 gigabytes of system, half of what the current min specs is now. So we're going to start with the specs we've currently got and make sure that at least systems that have that, we run at 60F across the board. And then I'm afraid for those really low-end systems, 4 gigabytes of system, 2 gigabytes of video, there'll have to be graphics modes. You know, reduce the quality of the shadows, reduce the draw distance, reduce this, that and the other to get to that 60 FPS sweet spot. There's literally no way you can offer high fidelity graphics at 60 FPS on the, say, the 93rd percentile of Steam. Go to another level. Should work, yeah. If you drop in a win zone into level 1, save, go back to the storyboard, you'll see a little nodule. And you can drag that nodule to any new level that you create in the storyboard. So you don't have to be level 2, level 3. You can drag it straight to level 5. When you run into the win zone, it will take you straight to level 5. That works right now. If there is some scenario that you've tried and it doesn't work, and we have done some very recent work in the EXP build, may already be fixed if this is a very recent issue. But if it's something that in the EXP hasn't been fixed, please post it in the issues board, because that's exactly the sorts of things we'll need to find out about. Otherwise you won't be able to make a complete game. Blood Moon Interactive asks, I'm a little confused about physics in Max. Do we have proper physics or just somewhat? I haven't really taken huge interest during the development of GameGuru Max on physics. Basically sat on top of the bullet engine that we've been using forever. And the basic physics at that. So gravity, capsules, making sure that you can have a box that pushes another box or a sphere that rolls down a hill. That kind of thing. I am aware of a lot of lure commands that were created, I think, by Eamon Moses, and that gives you lots of really cool extra physics capabilities, like connecting two entities together with a spring or a joint or a lever, and pretty cool stuff. And I dare say some other community members have created like vehicles and stuff with them. I would like to spend some time on that. I think I will probably really knuckle down and focus on it when we start talking about features, and more specifically vehicles in GameGuru Max. Don't want to just knock out like a hard-coded car. I want to be able to just give you the parts, and then when you drag in a car from the object library, it actually is a composite of a wheel and a chassis and a shell and destructible pieces that fall off over time and damage. And maybe you can already do that, but there isn't really a guide on that. I'd like to provide you with a comprehensive set of lure physics commands and a guide on how to create your own mechanical monstrosities. Okay, another question underneath. When will we have vehicles? After performance, stability, compatibility, and a chunk of games published. And when you start to see things like third person appear, vehicles probably won't be that far behind it officially. I say officially, it could be the community beats us to it, and there'll be some third party option where you can just go grab it, and you can have vehicles driving around way before DDC gets around to adding the official version. And just like we did with the particle editor, if the community version's really good, it can just get absorbed into the official version because it's better than anything we could have done. So yeah, keep your eye out. It may be something coming from the community instead of DDC. So here's a question mark in the middle of all this from Vince. Is there a way to add support in the importer to test the character works prior to importing it? For example, I have a character that flips on its side when I test a level. Yeah, when you get a really nice looking character in like a Turbo Squid or something, and then you import it, it goes on its side, it's because you've got a left-handed, right-handed coordinate twizzle, or you've got some weird rig that isn't compatible with how it was imported into the model importer. It's a lot easier just to use the GameGuru Max's own character rig using the character creator, because then once you use that, you get access to all the animations, all of the scaling and behaviors that are built for that rig. So it's just super convenient to use that. You can bring in your own, but then you have to do everything yourself. You've got to make sure that the handedness is correct, the scale is right, it's not using gazillion polygons, the rig's right, all the animations are built in and aligned to that rig and facing the right way. So you're taking on a lot of work if you want to bring in your own characters. It isn't easy a case of just grab a nice pretty character and just drag it into Max and it works. That isn't really how game development works at the lowest level. Maybe one day we'll have the ultimate super format, but right now it is a graft to try and make sure that all your planets line up before you can get a character imported and looking nice in Max. It is possible, and third-party artists have done it, but there is a bit of a slog to get there. And if there's anything we can do in terms of adding more information to the character's guide, which is already pretty cool, let us know and we'll flesh that out some more. If we can actually make the ultimate super importer, the least we can do is tell you what other people have done that was successful, and so you can emulate that path. Okay, next question is, hey Lee, what's planned for 2024? See previous 20 minutes of rant. Sorry, Duke229. If we complete all of the things I've just said, then it's feature requests heaven. And the feature request, we're not going to do a voting board. That didn't work out too well last time. I think what we'll probably do is if people are like 80% into their game project and it's a really great looking work in progress, and it's like, oh, I totally need this feature that will totally set my game apart, that's probably the feature we'll add. So if people come along and impress us with this really great, no stock media used, awesome game, and they want something like, I don't know, maybe that Portal. You remember game Portal where you could go through a window and then it appears so much and you level upside down and gravity's reversed? That doesn't exist right now, but if there's a game out there that's like, I totally need this for my final 5 levels, boom, that's something that we may consider. But there's another list which basically everyone keeps asking for over and over again. That's why I keep talking about third person and vehicles. It's literally like, these features are so oft requested, it's like the Game Maker isn't really complete without them. So I think we're going to have to add those just so those questions don't keep popping up. And remember, there are a lot of games that are in the third person perspective and are almost expected these days. But as soon as we've done that, then people want the RTS perspectives and then 2D mini games inside your 3D game and everything else. Admittedly, you can do all of that in Lua with scripting, but we're talking about features which are like out of the box. Drag it in, change 5 values, press go, and you've got that mechanism. That's what I really mean when I say features. There's quite a lot you can do if you know how to script. Most people come here because they don't necessarily want to script, but they do have some really great game ideas and they want to realise them quickly. Okay, questions. Who's got the questions? Okay, Mr. Vi. Yeah, Mr. Vi. Let's just look at this first. No, you have to make sure your character model is oriented correctly. That is very much correct, Nectrim. Mr. Vi, could you get a Dell XPS 9710, like what I have? It's got an RTX 3060, that's a nice card, i7, and loads of expandable storage and memory. Well, I suppose I could, but I've only got so much space around my desk, and I don't want to sort of get too hot with all these computers buzzing around. Don't worry, that spec you just rhymed off, that's above our current minimum spec, so you should be able to run all games, when we've finished our performance work, over 60 FPS on all of the demos and all the games that you're making as well. So that's a nice system, nothing wrong with that. I don't need to, if I'm getting it running great on a Median Eraser, it'll run great on a Dell XPS 17. Okay, I'll propose the same question again. Any city environment planned? City environment planned? Well, I assume you mean assets that portray a metropolitan city area with streets, street lights, buildings, doors. Go inside the doors, lifts, apartments, windows, smash window, jump out of 15-story window, jump on the floor, run around, cars, etc. When you're talking about assets, you really want to be looking at third-party contributions. Most of the DLCs that you see on Steam right now are created by third-party artists. They're not created by TGC. We got whiplash for that by, why are you wasting your time on assets when you should be fixing your broken game engine? And we listened. So you'll be noticing TGC spends pretty much all of their time working on bug fixes, performance, stability, compatibility, and the rest. We won't be spending all of our time, or hardly any of our time, creating our own art. There's an amazing community of third-party artists already in the GameGuru Max community. So look to them to create the assets that you want, or pick up Blender, have a go, create a building. It's not rocket science. It's a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of learning, but at least you can create your own custom content, and you've got the model importer to bring it in and bring your game ideas to life. So yeah, don't look to me for a city assets pack. I dare say one will appear in 2024, especially being nagging enough people. Okay, here's another question. How are the RPG functions coming along? I would describe our current RPG mechanics as sufficient. Pretty good. Everything that most people have asked for is in. So you've got the the in-game HUDs with the map and the stamina and the health and the mana, and you've got the inventory with the hot panel, so you can store lots of things. You've got ingredients, you can drop things, you can use things. You got crafting, so you can drag in a recipe, lots of different things that you've harvested and create new objects out of thin air. You've got a collections table, so you can have a list of objects that survive across multiple levels within your game project. You've got maps that you can zoom in and out of. You've got shopkeepers, so you can have shopkeepers that will sell you items and buy items from you. And then on top of that, you've got all of the object behaviors that support those HUD screens. So behind all of that clever stuff, there's always a behavior that says, oh, this is a knife, it has magical powers, or this is a healing potion that heals you, or this is a crafting kit that you need to collect before you can craft remotely instead of going to a crafting table. And a crafting table also has its own behavior. So we've got like what I would call a good starting point. I'd like to, as I said, once performance and stuff is out the way, I'd like to see us expand on that. Like right now, everyone's kind of forced to create their own HUD screens. Right now, they all will have these grey box effects. You can change them all around, so your own art, but everyone's kind of happy just to use the same grey boxes. I think it'd be nice if you just, with one drag in, change the entire theme of the entire RPG. Or drag in like a starting point. If you go into the hub, you'll see something called RPG Template, which is a little demo level that pulls in everything that we've got to show so far with RPG mechanics. But you'll notice there's a couple of obvious missing things, like a conversation tree. The idea that you can structure a quest with multiple characters that take 20-30 minutes, a lot of toing and froing of information and objects and missions and stuff. That's pretty thin on the ground. You have a quest system. You can check out that. You've got a quest system. In fact, in the demo level, there's I think 5 or 6 quests you can go on, all different kinds of ones. But I think there's more to go in terms of, you pick like one of the best RPG games, there's probably a lot of features in there that we currently don't have. Again, you could script, but I know what you mean. You want to be able to just drag it in, configure it quickly, and boom, you have that feature in your RPG. But we're pretty happy with what we've got so far. Similarly, we're pretty happy with all the puzzle mechanics that we've added. And so it's not just a shooter maker anymore. It's a shooter maker, an RPG maker, and a puzzle game maker. And who knows, in 2024 down the line, we'll have third-person maker and racing car maker as well. Oh, more questions. I'm just looking at the clock. We're 55 minutes in, which means there's only 4 minutes left. So we'll keep going. I'll try and answer the quickly ones and then see if we can get through quicker. So Monkey Frog is answering Duke. Another question. Is that a question? No, that's not a question. Oh, yes, there's Subway coming soon. Any chance of getting an audio mixer of some kind? Yeah, when I was playing around with the sound commands, right now they're pretty primitive, aren't they? There's not much you can do, like frequency and volume and stuff. But I remember like 10 years ago, I was playing around with atmospheric sounds, and different materials would like bounce a sound wave off a wall to have echoes and all that kind of stuff. And we seem to have lost that in the last decade or so. So I'd like to bring that in with some other controls. But I would say that's a nice to have when your game just crashes on someone's machine. But I think that will be falling into the feature request camp. And I think when we get to that, and there's enough people who want a lot of sound control, that should be relatively quick to do. I don't think there's a very exhaustive list of things you'd really need for crafting your audio in your games. Darwin Studio asks, did Lee just crash, or did I lose internet connection? Oh, I hope I haven't crashed. Lee lost it, he's just crashed. Oh no, same here. Lol, I think he crashed. Lee lost it. Seems to be back. He's back, yay, but whoa, it's blurry. Oh, refresh. Toast popped, lagged, lol. Oh, there's no timestamps on these, so I'm not sure how much you've actually lost. But I apologise if you didn't get all the juicy information and the answers. Who uses 144? What is that used for? Watch YouTube on a calculator. 144 hertz. I think the nicer gaming monitors use that. for your VSync. I don't. I stick to 60 FPS for the low end testing. What is the easiest and best method to import models from Blender? You'll have to ask someone in the community who uses Blender a lot. I'm going to say FBX because that's what I've seen happen. People use Blender, they export as FBX, comes in rather nice and the right way up in the model importer in GameGuru Max. So I'm going to say FBX because I've seen it work for other people. Okay, questions. Who's got the questions? Sorry about GameGuru Max. What about a Character Creator Parts DLC? Watch this space. Now, you've already seen all of the DLCs for the low poly stuff. Well, in order to do that, we actually had to have lots of new character parts, and so we're playing around with that right now. No promises and no deadlines and no release dates or anything like that, but yeah, we are now looking in 2024 to do some kind of Character Creator Parts thing. Now it supports custom character part categories in the Character Creator section. And 59 minutes in and I can't keep up with the questions. All right, 2 more questions then. We'll go over the hour just a little. Next question mark is at Vince. Will you add a hub in Steam for people to share their games they created? At some point, I think probably a good idea. I think when we get to the point where the games are not horrid and run great and just work for everyone, having a section in GameGuru Max, in the workshop, for example, where you can discover everyone's games. You've just published them, not like as a commercial game, just something they're proud of and they want to share it. Then you can browse through all those games, press it, it opens immediately in GameGuru Max and you can play it. I think that's a really cool idea. So let's look at that in 2024. I think that would be really engaging for people who are casually browsing Steam. Check out like 150 games in the GameGuru Max workshop section and play a few of them. I think that'd be a lot of fun. And the last question, if I can find the one underneath that, is Mr. Bai. How big can the map be in GameGuru Max when creating an RPG? 5 kilometers squared. You go into the terrain generator and then max out the map. It stops at 5 kilometers. And to walk 5 kilometers from left edge to right edge takes a very long time. And if there's water, swimming takes even longer. So it's pretty big. No one's complained that 5 kilometers was too small. All right, lie. There was one person who expected to have planet Earth simulated in GameGuru Max, and I had to let them down softly. That's not really realistic. You'd be spending the rest of your life populating a planet of game level. So 5 kilometers is where we are right now, and in the terrain generator you can squash that down to quite a small area if you don't need 5 kilometers squared for your gameplay area. I don't speak. Is that Russian? I probably. I can't translate quickly enough. Gotta run. Have a great new year, everyone. Play safe. Yes, I'm going to say that too. I'm sorry if there was a brownout. I'm going to check YouTube later to see where it was. Maybe post some information if any critical information was lost. But I hope you enjoyed this last broadcast of 2023. I will be back on the last Wednesday in January 2024 at 7 p.m. GMT, where I will be able to show you the fruits of what you're looking at right now. This is the current profile of our games engine. In 30 days, it should look a little different, and everyone's games will run a little bit faster. Is that a promise? Yeah, why not? Everyone's games will run a little bit faster in 30 days. So have a great rest of holiday, recharge those batteries so you're ready and fresh for 2024, and I'll speak to you all in 30 days. Until then, I shall say goodbye.